for transcreation. There's still so much nuance and creativity involved that NMT is just not applicable.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to SlatorPod guest segment. Today's guest segment is with Tanya Bogin, Managing Director of Craft London. Tanya, I'd normally start by asking where in the world the podcast finds you, but obviously this is our very first in-person podcast, and we are here in the Craft offices in London. So welcome to SlatorPod, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's I've followed Slator for many years, and it's really cool to be here with you in person after years of not being in person.
Absolutely, I know. Why don't we dive straight into a bit about your professional background and how you got into localization and creative translation?
Sure. So I actually started my career in radio, this is like reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
I managed a radio station. I had my own show. And then from there, I realized I needed a real job, quote unquote. And I got into project management, and I worked in project management at one of the biggest translation agencies in the world. You might have heard of it. I'm not going to name it by name. But yeah, my career started there, and I was actually in the medical field there, and I was doing linguistic validation and cognitive debriefing of patient questionnaires, which is interesting in a cultural manner of speaking, because actually there's so much to do with how those questionnaires can be tested in the public, with the public that has those conditions. So there's definitely a relationship there. But I moved on from there to localization marketing localization and transcreation, to working at WPP. And I did that for a number of years. And from there, I ended up at Kraft. And I came to Kraft to run Microsoft. It was at the time when that account changed hands from WPP to IPG, and I was sort of poached over. And I worked my way up. I was working in New York for many years. I'm from New York originally. From that point, I went from leading that business to transcreation and translation operations. And that's when my remit started to expand a little bit. And I went from specifically translation, localization, operations, and process and technology to the wider remit of regional operations for all of production. And then from there, as I got more and more anchored into the London operation, I took over as managing director for the end-to-end production facilities in London, which include not only transcreation, cultural adaptation, localization, and technical translation, but all the way to content creation, content production, audio, print, TV, digital production. So really the end-to-end offer for our clients and agency partners. And I've been doing this for, I guess now coming up to 13 years, something like that.
It's so interesting, that development you described from being in, taking care of kind of patient questionnaires to what you're doing now.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, there is definite applications there, because when you're doing cognitive debriefing, you're basically trying to understand cognitively what patients understand and what will elicit a particular response. And there's a relationship to transcreation where you're trying to elicit a laugh from someone in China, from master content that's coming from America. And while it might not be medical in nature, although actually frequently it is, maybe not the laugh part, but
hopefully not.
Yeah, right. There's definitely a similar degree of process that we have to follow from a cultural perspective to make sure it fits right with that audience. And there's and actually my training and background in that sort of stringent technical workflow has really helped me bring a custom and bespoke set of rigor to an otherwise industry that has very little rigor in it,
Right.
Which allows me to deliver consistent results for our clients.
But tell me a little bit more about Craft as a business, as a company.
Yeah.
What are the range of services that you're delivering, and what are
Sure.
some important client segments?
Sure, yeah. So I like to consider us the best content agency. So content and adaptation. So when I talk about content creation, I mean making things. We bring creative ideas to life. That's our reason for being, and that's sort of the moniker of and our tagline, as it were. Bringing creative ideas to life. But part of that is all of the elements that go into that. So that's, as I mentioned, the core services of TV, online, social, print, and digital production. There's creative content from scratch. So that's even ideation and making things, from either from a sentiment or an original idea, or adapting an idea. So, for example, if you've got a master campaign from a client that has all these different elements, adapting it for all the local marketplace, and that doesn't just include transcreation translation, although that's a huge part of it. That includes the cultural nuance analysis bit at the front, and that includes adapting all of the physicality of the asset, the pictures, the imagery, the relationship between the imagery and the words. And obviously for the formats for the local marketplace across all media. But beyond that, we're underpinned by a world-class technology platform, and that's not just tying in our bespoke CAT tool, as well as workflow automation, and of course, business management tool, and production automation technology as well, which is baked into that. So we do things like digital content optimization, marrying the media to a translation and production engine to make content move really fast. There's so many things that have changed, and especially AI, which we can talk about in a bit.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
So just give us a sense maybe of the size of transcreation translation as
right
within the business.
You asked me how big the Of course. So as an agency, so we're 1,400 employees in Europe. Globally rather. 26 different offices. London, Craft London is the European headquarters. We've got over 100 satellite offices. Amongst those 1,400 production specialists are, of course, the language management team and the project managers. We work with over 3,000 approved linguists, over 8,500 voiceover artists that are part of our network as well. And the important thing there is that all of those people are based in market. For us, we made the decision early on that if we're going to bring ourselves to market as a cultural localization agency that really takes nuance into account, you really need to work with people that are local, native, and based in market. And that's very important to us. As far as post-production specialists, we have people in the studio, people like our amazing audio engineer who's sitting here with us today, monitoring this. End-to-end production specialists along with the writers, and also, of course, cultural experts, strategic planners that work to help us out with our cultural consultation business.
So in terms of the profile of person who would be doing this in-market person, is it a translator? Is it a copywriter? Who's the typical profile of the person delivering?
It's just someone we find on the street.
Oh,
it's just a basic, layman. No.
Do you speak English?
I do speak multiple languages. No, it depends on the brief, right? So it's different set of profiles for different requirement, and we're actually certified by 17100. ISO 17100, that's language service certification, and that's obviously certifying our resources. And that means that whoever we put against a brief needs to have a certain set of minimum qualifications and experience in the industry, and we have a very rigorous testing process. So the person that we pair to do a project that's, for example, a cultural consultation piece will be a strategic planner who's formerly been a creative director at a local agency. Someone who's doing technical translation for medical white paper or a legal contract will have years of experience in that field. They will usually have a master's degree in the industry and the specific vertical, in addition to having a minimum of 5 years of translation experience, and obviously having been tested by a bespoke examination within our company. And beyond that, another test specifically that might be requested or submitted by a client. So let's put it this way: I don't like to make this joke, but it's still true. It's quite hard to be approved to write for craft translation, to be a translator, to be a writer. The acceptance rate is we're the elite. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
It's interesting you're talking about, having the kind of cultural consultation and obviously translators as well, and then also putting in place these kind of rigorous workflows. Yeah. Because I imagine there's quite a lot of back and forth and revisions, especially in a creative setting. How do you manage that?
Transcreation is not an exact science. So the way that we evaluate quality in a translation and localization is completely different from how we would evaluate quality in a cultural piece or a transcreation, which is, a mix of copywriting and translation. We don't even call them translators. We call them Transcreation Specialists because they're not quite copywriting, but they're definitely not translating. We have a bespoke workflow that we use. We have we call it like sort of our magic sauce. It's years and years honed a methodology that we've honed that's been really successful. But the phrase first time right methodology doesn't really apply to a creative science, you know? Could you even call it a science? I don't know. It's something that you get right over time by really partnering with your clients, you know? And we also, we work with a platform that actually allows us live brainstorming. So our cultural experts and writers and our clients will actually meet live on this platform. It's a bespoke platform to craft. And they have a discussion about the initial brief and the content before they even start writing. And is that is the thing that makes it really a lot simpler and easier of a process and makes our clients feel like they're taken along in the journey.
I think we already briefly touched on content types and what it is that you're delivering, but could you explain a bit more about what kind of projects and what kind of content it is that you're working on typically?
Yeah, I mean it's across all media and channels right now. Social is huge, right? So we're doing a lot of workflow management, community management on social streams as well, local community management, which is something that, in my experience, translation agencies don't typically do. But it's something that we've been able to marry our, account management and technical teams with our writers and basically cut the workflow where you might even go straight from like a creative idea or a brief straight into local language without any English in between, which is a completely new way of thinking about it, right? Like mind blowing. But you have to do that these days when you're working in social, in particular with clients with very short timescales and very, I would say demanding, but actually it's more particular local market representatives in the markets that really know what they want. And also, I mean, the world is changing. The local markets and brands, they realize how much power they have now to influence a global brand. You need to be really, really deferential for those teams and make them feel like they're part of the conversation. But back to your question about what content types. I mean, of course, there's the usual TVC, right? That old amazing format. But then right now, it's all about online video. It's from a technical perspective. I mean, we do a lot of technical work for medical, pharmaceutical, legal, and financial services. So there's definitely a big part of our business that handles white papers and things like that, clinical research protocols, ICFs, like all of that. But on the other side of it, you've got taglines, commercials, online video scripts, voiceover scripts, radio, that old medium. Love radio. Still always love radio. Print, out of home, a lot of experiential stuff. We're doing a lot of localization now for the metaverse.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, I don't even want to open that. I don't want to open that can of worms. That might be for another combo. But we're doing a lot of work with AI right now. We do machine translation, neural machine translation, but we use it for very specific requirements. That's not something that I would allow my team to do for transcreation because it's still a human-driven business. And there's still so much nuance and creativity involved that, NMT is just not applicable, in my opinion.
Well, it's almost like when you're talking about doing the ideation, or sometimes not even involving translation, just from a shared brief, then where even would you apply machine translation? There's nothing to translate per se.
I always say that, the advent of technology and AI is like, obviously it's something that we work with a lot these days, but you still need a human to feed it commands. The algorithm is still based on human knowledge and intellect and cultural nuance. The person still needs to know what's going on. The machine can't pick it up just like that. The machine searches the world for existing information and packages it in a way that people can understand, right? But getting that information still comes from someone telling it what to do. And that's kind of our way of surviving in the industry, because I see a lot of translators now posting on LinkedIn and everywhere saying, oh crap, what's going to happen to us? Are we all going to just automate everything? And the answer is, well, you have to adapt. But there's always going to be a need for what we do.
Well, so you said machine translation only in very specific use cases, but tell us a little bit about the other kinds of technology that you are employing in your workflows.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously workflow automation. I mean, that's basic stuff, using the best-in-class cloud-based CAT tool. I've worked with so many different tools, from DL World Server to to XTM to XTRF, like all of these different tools I've sampled. We've picked the best one. I think we've kind of rigged it the way it works best for us. So that's the basic technology. But then there's the technology that communicates between the media partners that we have and direct translation. So it's like it's part of the DCO engine, for dynamic content optimization. So you're going from instructions from media that they get online based on their tools from Salesforce, and that gets translated directly into us producing that work automated and then localizing it on the fly. So it's pretty cool. It's like a kind of an always-on content thing. Then there's, of course, if we talked about machine translation, then we can talk about deepfake technology. Companies like Synthesia.
Yeah, I was going to ask about your partnership with them.
Yeah,
well.
I'll talk about that as well. Stefan's a good colleague and friend of mine for a number of years. He's one of the founders. There's that technology. There's of course ChatGPT and OpenAI and all of that stuff is now in progress with us looking at real world client applications for it. But then there's SEO optimization as well. So that's another core thing that we do, SEO. And then there's some secret stuff we're working on at the moment as well around image optimization and automating that. How do you culturally adapt an image from the master image, featuring people, and how do you figure out what's the best localized version of that, and can you speed up that process instead of going to the local market? So we're doing R&D on that now.
I remember looking into, or at least seeing a few research papers on that topic in terms of sort of like lip synthesis and things like that, which is very interesting as well.
I mean, we went from just facial deepfake with the Synthesia algorithm. Now we're deepfaking entire bodies, and that's being used on shoots. Another big thing, which is kind of off to the side of translation localization, is virtual production. But actually, it's part and parcel because sustainability is massive for my company and myself personally. And with virtual production, we're able to recreate the most intricate and incredible backgrounds that you'd never know. And again, pairing that with the technology that we use to translate and localize, and it all kind of fits into one giant ecosystem. And I think what I tell my teams is, and I also tell this to translators because I'm still, at my core, I'm still a translation project manager, honestly. I might be the MD of a production company, but
I think it never leaves you, to be honest.
It never leaves you. It's always with you. And I have a lot of, sentimental value around the written word. And I always tell people this, like, don't be afraid of technology. Like your brain is always going to be necessary. There's a certain romance to it. It's never going to die. People need it. Just be open to it. And that's why we have kind of our hands in a couple of different pockets, but we also don't spread ourselves too thin. I'd like to invest in things that have real world client applications, we can talk about the metaverse, but that's like a kind of a separate topic. But I know a lot of people are talking a lot about it, but no one really gets how it's going to help them. And for me, it's part of the tools that I use to help brands communicate to their audience.
So you're translating for the metaverse. Is that
it's beyond that. It's architecting worlds in the metaverse and using copywriting transcreation to do that. Because when you're meeting somebody in the virtual world, how do you speak to them? Right? If you can't understand them, you need a translator there. And that translator could be a machine, or it could be the standard transcreation process that we use, but you have to adjust it for that kind of platform.
And it's clients that are asking for that?
Clients, but also proactively, we do a lot of briefs for just, things that we believe in. So, yeah.
All right. So bringing it out of the metaverse.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's great. Well, can you maybe give us an example of a client case study where transcreation's played a big role?
Yeah, for sure. I might even go a little bit into the past. Some really interesting stuff. So I can talk about this because they're no longer a client. It's been a couple of years, but a luxury airline, Gulfstream, back in the day, it wasn't that long ago, we helped them figure out how to name a series of their planes, because their planes have a combination of letters and numbers. And together, that combination could have, all kinds of superstitious transcreation feasibility implications in different marketplaces, particularly in APAC, where letters and numbers combination have real serious, consequences for people's feeling about flying. So we had to do this huge naming, branding, cultural consultation to figure out what combination would work. And we helped them choose an algorithm that allowed them to name a series of their planes, in perpetuity, for instance. So that was one example. But that's more on the cultural side. Transcreation wise, the tagline from Coke, taste the feeling?
Yeah.
How do you adapt that? We did that for all of the African and APAC markets.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose a literal translation could go quite wrong
Well, it's
with that
synesthesia, right? You're conflating the senses. To taste a feeling, it's not a thing. How do you explain that in Burma? Not just in Burma. Burmese is the font doesn't have Unicode, so how do you write it? What font do you use, right?
Right.
It's pretty wild. So that was a really big project. That was and I think Coke really saw the benefit of working with craft in that instance, because it wasn't just you brief us, we give you options, which obviously basic stuff, options for transcreation. We actually worked with their marketers and had a lot of conversations with them to try to get to the bottom of what it really meant, not just from an English perspective to kind of appease the global team and their goals, but also figuring out what's important to them locally and how we can communicate that through language. And it was really successful. We did 15 APAC markets, and then we moved into all the African markets.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've heard this before. I mean, there's no single point of truth for some of those languages. Different words. There's no dictionary even. So figuring out how to bridge the gap culturally between Sesotho, Xhosa, Swahili. It was pretty crazy, but we did it.
Yeah.
We did the production end to end, and it was used in all their out of home and billboards and everything, and it was a big success.
Nice, thank you. And then we were going to talk about the Synthesia partnership as well. You mentioned them
a couple
of times, and you worked with them on an advertising campaign, I think, for Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, it's for one of our major clients. For JustEat. I think everyone's seen the Snoop Dogg ad. So
yes.
that was Craft London. That was us. And we also did all the localization for it, of course, which was challenging. And where Synthesia came into play really was that the JustEat brand is not Just Eat in every market. Different name for the brand in Germany, Netherlands, all over the world. So what we did was we used the algorithm and the software to map Snoop's face, and obviously enabled us to, with a custom VO that he pre-recorded, we didn't have to reshoot him in that context, which would have been extremely expensive, right?
Yeah.
To fly to LA just to do that with the list of all the different brands. And there was a merger at the time, so those names were even changing. So it was success in terms of sustainability, success in terms of you could never tell that the way the mouth was moving wasn't really his mouth. It was a Snoop avatar. And like I said, it went from us using facial a deep fake to us using body deep fakes for other clients, which are in progress right now.
Yeah, it's super interesting, that space, and we had Synthesia on the podcast not so long ago.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
amazing.
A year or so ago.
Amazing.
Time flies.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the other really, really key, I think, example is we've been using it a lot in e-learning. So for this is, I'm not going to name the client, but it's for a fast-moving consumer goods big brand, and they have a medical division that they were just opening up, and we took basically we did an end-to-end solution where we took it's like thousands and thousands of pages of white paper content, created a script out of that because they needed to train their teams in how to explain what the new division does. And we fed it into a custom avatar that we made for them with a custom VO in the back, and paired it with an e-learning module that trained their teams. And the template that we've created out of English is now being used and is being localized in all the different markets and languages using the same avatar.
Right.
And it's been a massive success. Obviously, it's for internal use, but it's I think for you've spoken to Synthesia, so like the platform that they have. It's like a self-serve platform basically. E-learning is a great application of it.
Any others that you can foresee sort of in the future?
Oh gosh, I mean, pairing like OpenAI now with deep fake you can create a shoot out of nothing without any actors.
With a couple of prompts.
With a couple of prompts. But you know what? Despite all the couple of prompts and everything else, you still have a computerized voice unless you use an original VO. So you can automate pretty much every process, and you can put AI into every process, but the spoken word is still the spoken word. And it sounds, it's getting there. It's getting there to sound like real, but it's not quite there yet. And you still need a voiceover artist, and you still need transcreation, and you still need copywriting to get it right. So,
just finally, why don't you tell us about some of the key initiatives that you're going to be working on in 2023 and beyond?
Well, we've done a little bit of talking on AI. So that's like I said, there's a new platform we're working on. We haven't gotten a name for it yet. You can call it the Craft Culture Calculator or something. We're trying to figure out how we can apply SEO principles to image, to basically get nuances, cultural nuances translated into images, and try to automate that process a little bit to give clients some ammunition when they're thinking ahead of how to use images culturally appropriately in the different markets. But a lot of work that we're doing now is in client applications in AI and OpenAI, ChatGPT, how we can use it, because I mean it's nice to do these like brand collaborations that I keep seeing on LinkedIn, which are amazing and really cool. But also there needs to be an application for brands that's more sort of straight to market, right? And then the other thing, I think, me personally, cost of living is going up. And I still want to protect this industry and protect translators and writers. And for me, it's really important to continue to uphold some of the principles in the past, paying people the right amount of money, for example. Like if you look up, I'm very big on like the Prosy Blue Boards. Like if you look Craft up on that, I think our rating is really high. I want to keep it that way. I want people to feel like, regardless of the technology, to be motivated to work with us because we treat people right. Because at the core of our business, I think it's still a people business. And that's still a big initiative for me continuously, right? But then sustainability. So one of the things that AI helps us do is to increase the sustainability of our productions. And that's not just in translation, transcreation. That's really in how we do shoots and how we produce ads, we produce videos and all of that. And that's a really big focus for us, reducing our carbon footprint to zero. So yeah, those are some of the big things that we're working on.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Thanks for being with us, and super illuminating discussion. Thanks,
Thank
Tanya.
you so much, Esther. Thanks. Nice to be on here.
Bye.